Hey, Christina, thanks for getting this in. And this building's fine. This is, well, plenty big enough for our purposes here today. And thanks for the equipment shot and the meter use shots. FYI, if anybody watches this, this is what I mean by meter use shot. Actually, show me how you're holding the meter in the scene. That's what we're looking for here. And so you did get two very different types of light, and that's good too. So here, for your composition, you're using an extremely wide-angle lens. Let's see if you told us what it is. 28, it looks like 28 millimeter, somewhere between 18 and 28 millimeter. Assuming, yes, I think so, because there's no way that you're shooting at f111. Okay, okay, so that makes sense, because that's why we're seeing this warping down here with that. And so what you've done here is you've really exposed for the sky. This is in deep shadow still, and so I think that this exposure could have been a better compromise between deep shadow and sky, because the sky, you can see it's actually pretty contrasty, and so we would have still had nice information in this beautiful dramatic sky if you would have given us a little bit more exposure value and more information here. This feels quite in the dark. And so the way that you would have done this, your meter use shots, I could tell you, is you would have metered, found an area that actually had, that was in the sun, so that would qualify as the sky. So you just get out of the shade of the building, get in the sun, and then use the meter exactly as you are with the Lumisphere facing back towards the camera, and then you would go stand in here in this area and take a meter reading, and you would probably get a considerable difference in exposure value between the two meter readings, like, you know, easily 10 stops difference. And then you would have to decide if you wanted to prioritize nudging towards preferring the sky or prioritize nudging towards preferring the shadows. So in this one, you know, this is exposed, this image is exposed for the shadows, and so our sky is almost entirely blown out. So what we'd probably like to see is something between this, where's those final shots, and this, something in between those two. Does that make sense? Okay, and then with your settings, so there's two things going on with this image that are technically a little bit not desirable. So one of them is you're using 3200 ISO, and if you're not making a huge print, if you're only printing like, say, you know, 6x10 or something, that's not going to be a big deal. But a lot of cameras, digital sensors at 3200 ISO are yielding just a terribly grainy image. Some of them are better than others, depends on your camera, really. So you have to look into that or just test for yourself and decide when you think the ISO is just too much for printing at 8x10. Like this would probably be an 8x10, and it's just a little bit too much. So there's that. But when I look at your exposure settings, I'm assuming you had a tripod with you. You should have had a tripod with you. And the slowest shot that you've got at night is 1/60th of a second. And you're doing a great job using a wide open aperture, you know, that's great. But at 1/60th of a second, you know, that's really fast with a tripod. I mean, you could shoot for 3 seconds if you wanted and bring this ISO way down, and then you'd have a higher quality final image. The other thing that's going on here is I think it's so dark that you're having a difficult time focusing on anything. So another photographer's trick that you would do in this case is go get yourself like a really nice LD flashlight that's got kind of like a focused light on it, so you could you could spotlight it at something pretty far away, and then you could just use that, like shine that on your subject while you're focusing, and then, you know, then turn off the flashlight and make your image. I keep I don't know what brand it is, but it's one of those nice ones. It's just like a little steel pocket flashlight that I can actually hold in my mouth, which is really helpful when I'm trying to focus my camera. And I hold it in my mouth, and I flash the light on the whatever it is that's too dark for me to see otherwise, and that's how I can focus. So I think that those are the two problems with this image, because this image is really fuzzy. And I think it's one because of the ISO, and two because I think it's slightly out of focus because it was so dark you couldn't focus. Does that make sense? Your compositions are pretty good, I think. I think you did a good job walking all around the building, checking out different viewpoints, and then choosing for us one that you felt was rather attractive. This seems to be your final choice. I do think other exposures out of your daylight shoots were better. I think this one is actually a really, really good exposure value compared to this one. I think this one's just too dark. However, like I said, we've got that nice sky, but maybe right next to it, right next to it. That's a nice compromise between the two. Of course, this is an overexposure. We've got plenty of detail in the shadows here, but everything else is washed out. Then this one, I feel like the shadows are just too dark, but this one is just right about on the money. I hope that makes sense. Anyways, So yeah, add that flashlight to your camera bag, and you'll be able to use it for night photography. And definitely, if you didn't use a tripod for this, use a tripod, because then you would have been able to shoot at a lot slower of a shutter speed, which would have given you a whole like a much wider range of creative exposure possibilities. Okay, thanks, Christina.